The first week I moved into Cedar Grove Estates, a police cruiser rolled up my driveway like I'd done something violent. All because my internet went down for 20 minutes, and my neighbor told 911 I was committing electronic warfare. Then the HOA slid a notice under my door, warning they could slap a lien on my home like I was some kind of criminal squatter. I'm Ryan Walker, and I didn't move into a quiet neighborhood because I wanted community meetings and matching mailboxes. I moved because I'd just crawled out of a messy divorce, my job was remote, and I wanted the kind of silence you can actually hear wind in trees, no sirens, no drama. Cedar Grove was supposed to be that. Clean sidewalks, trimmed hedges, the kind of place where people wave with 2 fingers off the steering wheel and pretend they're relaxed. The first person to welcome me was Linda Parker. Mid-40s, perfect blowout perfume you could taste, and a smile that didn't touch her eyes. She didn't introduce herself like a normal neighbor. She marched up my porch holding a thick white binder like it was scripture, and she said, "I'm Linda. I keep this community running." Then she handed me the binder and tapped the cover. "You'll want to read the Homeowners Association standards. We like things consistent here." I flipped it open, pages of rules, sub-rules, and clarifications that somehow made everything feel illegal. She watched my face like she was waiting for guilt to show up. When I told her I worked from home, she tilted her head and went, residential character is important. We don't do businesses." "It's a laptop," I said, half laughing because it was so ridiculous. "Not a factory." Linda didn't laugh. She just smiled wider like I'd confirmed something she'd already decided. 2 days later, I scheduled an internet upgrade. Not for fun, my work depends on stable connections, secure tunnels, video calls that don't freeze on my face mid-sentence like I'm confessing to a crime. The provider gave me a window, a tech truck arrived, and that should have been the end of it. Linda made sure it wasn't. She came power walking across my lawn, pointing at the utility pole like she owned it, barking, "Stop this right now. You're disturbing the entire neighborhood." I looked over at the technician, who looked over at me like, "Is this lady serious?" "Ma'am," I said, keeping it polite, "it's an upgrade. They're swapping equipment. You got a notice." Linda held up her phone like a badge. "My work is sensitive. I can't have my communications compromised." "Okay," I said, "but this is routine. It'll be quick." Her eyes narrowed. People always say that. The upgrade took longer than expected, and at one point, the connection did drop like it does in every neighborhood in America at some point. 20 minutes. That's it. I was making coffee when I heard the knock, hard, official, not neighborly. I opened the door and there were 2 officers standing there, hands resting near their belts, scanning my porch like they expected a lab. One of them said, "Sir, we got a call about interference with local communications." I blinked. Interference? What? From behind them, Linda appeared like she'd been summoned by the word authority. She didn't stand beside them, she stood slightly behind like a director watching her scene play out. "He's systematically targeting our infrastructure," she said, voice trembling on purpose. "It's electronic warfare. He could be who knows what." I stared at her. "Are you out of your mind?" "My Wi-Fi went out because the company was working." Linda clutched her chest. "That's what they all say." One officer asked me a few questions, looked at the tech work order, and after 10 minutes of pure humiliation, they left with a look that said, "We know this is nonsense, but we have to show up." Linda stayed. Of course she did. She leaned in, lowered her voice, and said, "We protect our own here. If you don't belong, it becomes obvious." Then she turned and walked away like she'd just saved the neighborhood from a supervillain. I tried to let it go. Seriously. I told myself, it's one psycho neighbor. Ignore her. That lasted until the first HOA notice showed up. It wasn't a friendly reminder. It was a formal violation letter printed like a legal threat claiming I was running unauthorized commercial operations and owed a $500 fine. There was a line about continued non-compliance may result in lien proceedings. Lien. On my home. Because I had a laptop and upgraded my internet. I marched to the community office, but there was no staff, just a locked door and a sign that said, "Contact the board via email." So I emailed. I asked for the exact rule I violated. I asked for proof. I asked for an appeal hearing. The reply came 12 hours later, short and smug. Violation confirmed. Fine due within 10 days. Signed Linda Parker, Acting President. Acting President. That's when it clicked. Linda wasn't just being annoying. She'd put herself in a position where she could weaponize paperwork, and she enjoyed it. After that, the neighborhood started feeling watched. Linda's car would creep past my house like she was counting my breaths. A cheap camera appeared on a pole, angled a little too perfectly toward my front door. I'd step outside and she'd be there, phone up, snapping photos like I was a rare species. My internet kept acting up at the worst times, mid-call, mid-file transfer, mid-presentation. It wasn't constant, which made it worse. It felt targeted, and it started bleeding into my work. One afternoon, a client said, "Ryan, your connection is unstable. Are you sure you can handle this contract?" That hit harder than Linda's little letters. Because Linda wasn't just stealing my peace, she was threatening my livelihood. And here's the part nobody likes to admit. There was a night I sat at my kitchen table with that violation letter, stared at the word lien, and actually opened a real estate site. Not because I thought Linda was right, but because I thought, how much energy am I willing to spend proving I belong in my own house? I imagined packing boxes again, starting over again, letting a bully win again. My stomach turned. Then my doorbell rang. It was Evelyn Harper, an older woman who lived 3 houses down. White hair and a bun cardigan, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. She didn't start with small talk. She stepped inside, looked around like she was checking for listening devices, and said, "Linda's going after you because you're new. And because you won't roll over." I just stared. "You know about this." Evelyn pulled a folder from her tote bag and laid it on my table. "I've been collecting for months. She's been bleeding the Homeowners Association dry." Inside were meeting notes, budget printouts, weird invoices from a security consulting firm with a mailbox address and signatures that didn't match. Evelyn pointed at a line item, $47,000 labeled Community Safety Upgrades. Nobody saw a single upgrade. My anger shifted clean, focused. So she's not just a Karen, she's stealing. Evelyn nodded once, and she uses violations to keep people scared and quiet. That night, I stopped treating this like a neighbor dispute and started treating it like what it was: abuse of power with a paper trail. I went through the bylaws like I was reading logs after a breach. Turns out the HOA rules allowed remote professional work explicitly. Linda's violation was nonsense. Then I found something even better. The bylaws required proper notice quorum and a minimum number of votes for board elections. Linda's acting president status. It was built on smoke. The last election had 3 votes. 3. In a neighborhood of dozens. Evelyn introduced me to Diane Foster, a woman with an accountant's calm and an auditor's brutality. She looked at the financials and said, "Oh, this is sloppy." She's not even trying to hide it. While Diane worked the numbers, I handled what I knew, evidence that couldn't be argued away with attitude. I set up a monitored network segment, basic and legal, the kind that records access attempts and anomalies. If someone was poking around, I wanted timestamps, IPS, and patterns. And wouldn't you know? The moment Linda started checking on things again, there were repeated access attempts from a device that matched her location and timing. Not proof of hacking by itself, but enough to show she wasn't just paranoid. She was involved. A few days later, Linda showed up at my door in the evening when she thought nobody was watching. Different tone, softer. "Ryan," she said, leaning into the doorway like we were friends, "you're clearly talented." I didn't move. "What do you want?" She smiled like she was offering me an opportunity. "You could help the board. Help me. There are people who pay well for someone with your skill set. We could make this whole unpleasantness disappear." There it was, the pivot. The bribe wrapped in community language. I kept my face neutral, let her talk, let her fill the silence with her own confidence. And while she did, my phone recorded every word. When she left, I didn't feel scared anymore. I felt ready. The Homeowners Association had a budget meeting that weekend, public, in the community center. Linda loved those meetings because she could control the room. This time she wasn't going to control anything. The room was packed. Neighbors who usually avoided eye contact were suddenly sitting upright, whispering, watching Linda like they were seeing her for the first time. Linda walked in wearing a blazer like she was running for governor. She took the front table, tapped the microphone, and said, "Before we begin, we need to address a security threat in our community." Then she pointed straight at me. "This man has been interfering with communications. He is a danger to Cedar Grove." I stood up slowly. No shouting, no theatrics, just a folder in my hands. Okay, I said loud enough for everyone. Let's talk about threats. Linda's eyes flicked to the folder just for a second. I held up the first page. $47,000 has been withdrawn from our HOA funds under community safety upgrades. There's no vendor record, no deliverables, and the company address is a mailbox. Murmurs rippled through the room like wind through dry leaves. Diane stood beside me and calmly laid out the numbers, invoice dates that didn't align, signatures that didn't match, payments split in ways that avoid basic review. Evelyn raised her hand and said, "She's been fining anyone who asks questions. She tried it on me. She tried it on the Millers. Now she's trying it on Ryan." Linda snapped. "This is a conspiracy. These people are disgruntled." I looked at her and said, "Linda, you called the police on me because your internet flickered. You threatened my home with a lien because I work remotely. And now you're sitting on missing funds while pretending I'm the problem." Linda's face tightened, the mask slipping. "You don't belong here," she hissed into the mic, forgetting the room could hear her. And right then, like the universe had perfect timing, the doors at the back opened. 2 county investigators walked in with a folder and a look that didn't care about Linda's blazer. One of them said Linda Parker. Linda froze. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. "We have a warrant regarding misuse of homeowners association funds," the investigator said, voice flat official. Linda tried to stand tall, but her shoulders sagged under the weight of reality. She turned to the room like she expected someone to save her. Nobody moved. As they stepped forward, Linda's eyes darted to me, pure hate, pure disbelief, like she couldn't understand how the guy she tried to bully with paperwork had backed her into a corner with facts. They took her by the arm, guided her toward the exit, and the microphone caught one last sharp breath like the sound of her power draining out. The door closed behind her, and the room finally exhaled. And that's the thing about bullies who hide behind rules. Once the truth shows up, the rules turn on them.